It's nice to be working with Bill and everybody again, and we put it together, and it's going to happen, and it looks like a good film.
Remember when the weapon a movie deployed against an ancient supernatural evil was a 1967 classic soul record, the collective goodwill of 8 million people, a Bobby Brown cameo, and the Statue of Liberty, and none of those choices really felt wrong for even a second? Well, that was Ghostbusters 2. In 1989, IvanReitman gave New York City a river of psychic misery running beneath its streets. A Carpathian warlord who had been using a painting as a waiting room for 5 centuries, and 4 men that the city had declared finished and then needed again anyway. BillMurray was Venkman, the man who'd treat the fate of New York like somebody else's inconvenience. DanAykroyd was Ray, still a believer when nobody else was. HaroldRamis was Egon, still measuring things that hadn't asked to be measured. Sigourney Weaver came back as Dana. Ernie Hudson was Winston, still the one reacting to all of this like a normal person would. And Peter MacNicol arrived as Janusz, a museum curator who weighed his options against an ancient evil and picked the wrong column. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Ghostbusters 2. And stick around for number 1, because the happiest song in Ghostbusters 2 has one of the saddest stories in all of music. But before we start, hit like and subscribe. The Ghostbusters animated Lady Liberty with one of the greatest pop hits of all time. All you have to do is hit a button. All right, no job too big, no fee too big. Let's go. Number 15. The studio announced Ghostbusters 2 before anyone agreed. Chairman David Putnam arrived at Columbia Pictures in 1986 with a stated preference for small, artistically serious films and no interest in the franchise blockbuster that his predecessor had built. Ghostbusters was not his property. He didn't develop it, he hadn't ordered it, and he had no particular use for it. His solution was to announce its sequel anyway. In April of 1987, Putnam announced Ghostbusters 2 would be filming later that year. There was just one problem. Nobody had told the director, IvanReitman. That was Reitman's movie, announced on Reitman's timeline without Reitman's knowledge. So the project still depended on Reitman, BillMurray, DanAykroyd, and HaroldRamis, all of whom had enough creative leverage that the movie wasn't happening unless they all agreed. And at that point, they had it. Putnam didn't really help matters either by publicly describing BillMurray as an actor who takes Hollywood money without giving back to his art. Murray's representative was Mike Ovitz, and at the moment, arguably, he was the most powerful agent in the industry. And he also happened to represent Aykroyd, Ramis, and Reitman. One announcement, one insult, and Putnam had managed to frustrate every person with authority over this franchise simultaneously. November 1987 came and went. Not a single frame of Ghostbusters 2 was shot. By September, Putnam was removed from Columbia, with the Murray situation on record as a contributing factor. A year later, Ghostbusters 2 did actually begin filming, with IvanReitman directing, BillMurray on board, and the chairman who announced the sequel no longer at the studio. For a while, the only place that Ghostbusters 2 actually existed was in a press release. Number 14. A city that didn't care sent 2,000 people before sunrise. A call went out for 300 extras. A night shoot at Washington Square, the scene where panicked New Yorkers flee a giant ghost tearing through the arch. 300 would have been plenty. First take? Well, 750 showed up. Second take? 1,200. And by the third, word had gotten out that Ghostbusters was filming, and somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people were packed into the square at 5 in the morning. The production had stopped counting and just started bracing. A VistaVision camera sat dead center, crowds pouring in from 3 streets and under the arch. On cue, all of them screamed and ran, and plenty of them ran straight at the camera. People climbed over cabs, crew had jumped in front of the lens to keep from getting flattened. The effects supervisor compared it to King Kong losing Manhattan. So the chaos that you see, it's not acting. The movie's whole premise is that New York gave up on the Ghostbusters. And then the crew asked for 300 bodies and got thousands before sunrise. The city may have stopped believing in ghosts, but they never stopped believing in Ghostbusters. Number 13. Columbia traded its soundtrack for one Bobby Brown song. Bobby Brown is only on screen for about 30 seconds in Ghostbusters 2. Getting him there cost Columbia far more than a cameo. By 1989, Brown was one of the biggest stars in pop music, and producer Peter Afterman wanted him to record the sequel's theme the way that Ray Parker Jr. had defined the original film. His offer wasn't a check, though. He handed Brown's label, MCA Records, the rights to the entire soundtrack album, all to land one Bobby Brown song. Brown agreed, with one condition: a role in the film. By the time he showed up, filming had nearly wrapped, so Reitman wrote him a quick cameo as the mayor's doorman. 30 seconds. No arc, you blink and you miss it. The song wasn't. On Our Own hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It held there for 3 weeks and topped the R&B chart. It became one of the most enduring parts of Ghostbusters 2 and outlasted most of the film's critical reputation. MCA got the album, Brown got a Dorman credit, and Columbia handed away their own product for a performance that became more famous than anything that they negotiated to keep. The trade looked worse the longer that anyone looked at it. Nobody stopped examining it. Number 12, the $215 million hit that couldn't get a Ghostbusters 3. Ghostbusters II made $215 million, and the original four never starred in another one. Murray came out of the sequel demoralized and made clear that he wasn't coming back for a third film. Under the deal in place since the original, Murray, Aykroyd, Ramis, and Reitman each held veto power over the franchise. One no was a hard stop, and Murray's no held. Scripts came in and scripts would get rejected. There's a legendary story that Murray got a Ghostbusters 3 draft, ran it through the shredder, and then mailed the confetti back with a note about nobody paying to watch old men chase ghosts. Aykroyd swears it never happened. It's too good a story to fully die and too mean to fully believe. Then, in 2014, HaroldRamis died. The man who co-wrote both original films and gave us Egon Spengler never got to make another Ghostbusters movie. Hollywood kept the name alive. A reboot here, a revival there, but the original four were done. Ghostbusters Afterlife arrived in 2021, directed by Jason Reitman, Ivan's son, with the surviving originals reduced to cameos. 32 years after the sequel, that was still the ending. 4 guys, 1 veto each, and a yes that never came together again. Number 11, Vigo's full name is an inside joke. Now, Vigo's full name in Ghostbusters 2 is a private joke hiding in plain sight. Built out of the people who made the movie The Von Homburg, comes directly from Wilhelm von Homburg, the actor who physically portrayed Vigo throughout the film. The second half is even stranger. Vigo's surname, Deutschendorf, matches the family name of the twins who played baby Oscar. The child Vigo spends the entire movie trying to possess. And if that name sounds familiar, well, there's another reason. The Deutschendorf twins were the nephew of folk singer John Denver, born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., a man who represented a strain of American warmth and sincerity that sits in roughly the opposite direction from the sorrow of Moldavia on any cultural map. So the full name of Ghostbusters 2's Ancient Tyrant is a mashup of the actor playing him and the family name of the baby he's trying to possess. Once you know it, it's impossible to unhear. Number 10. The only thing that everyone agreed worked was never in the script. One character kept getting praised, even by critics who hated Ghostbusters 2, and that's Peter MacNicol's Janusz Poha. In the original script, he wasn't even Janusz, he was Jason, a museum curator who serves Vigo, and the page gave MacNicol almost nothing else to work with. By his own account, it was a nothing role, something that 12,000 actors could have played exactly as written. So he didn't play it as written. Before he auditioned, MacNicol decided that Janusz should come from the same homeland as the painting that he's obsessed with, which made him Carpathian. Then he built an accent to match. He stitched it from a Czech friend, an agent that he'd heard at a Romanian travel agency, and Meryl Streep's voice in Sophie's Choice, a movie that MacNicol happened to co-star in. He walked into the audition already in character, and Reitman bought the whole invented person on the spot. He even wanted Janusz in a Black Beatles-style wig, but that got vetoed since half the cast already had dark hair. The wig didn't make it, but everything else did. The accent, the line readings, the off-kilter comic menace, critics singled that out as the movie's one real highlight. None of it was written, requested, or sitting in any draft. It existed because one actor showed up already having done a job that nobody asked him to do. Number 9, recast in post, notified by the movie theater. Wilhelm von Homburg did the whole role on set, lines and all, and then post-production decided that his delivery was too slurred to carry an ancient warlord. So they quietly handed every word to Max von Sydow and dubbed him over. Nobody told von Homburg. Now, the way that he found out was the way that the rest of us did, sitting in the audience at the screening, watching his own face open its mouth while a stranger's voice came out. He stood up and walked out. It didn't help his career. He drifted into smaller roles and then died of cancer in 2004. The film's executive producer later summed him up to a reporter as crude and bigoted, and by most accounts, that wasn't unfair. Both things sit next to each other just fine. He was a difficult guy, and getting replaced without a heads up, that's still a brutal way to find out. The face is his, the menace is his, but every word belongs to someone else. Number 8. Ghostbusters 2 faked its most famous painting. The terrifying ancient oil painting at the center of Ghostbusters 2, yeah, that's not a painting. It also isn't what it looks like. The movie presents it as a centuries-old oil portrait, but what audiences are actually staring at is a photo of von Homburg, doctored to look like an old European masterpiece. That wasn't the first plan. Reitman rejected the early designs for looking too much like fantasy artwork. He called them too Conan. He wanted Vigo to feel like someone who could have stepped out of a real museum, not off the cover of a paperback. So they brought in Glenn Etchison, director of the Pageant of the Masters, whose whole specialty was making real people look exactly like paintings. A painter named Lou Police did a real oil portrait first, and then Reitman approved it. And then Etchison spotted the problem. Blown up across a movie screen with the audience sitting right underneath, and a painting's never going to match von Homburg's actual face, so they had to scrap it. They built a set dressed to read flat, posed von Homburg in full costume, makeup, and prosthetics, killed every shadow with the lighting, and then photographed the whole thing. Then they aged the photo until it looked like a painting that they'd just thrown out. The real oil now hangs in Ivan Reitman's house. The fake one, the photograph pretending to be a painting, that's the one that terrified millions. Hey, quick pause. The original Ghostbusters or Ghostbusters II? Which one do you actually rewatch more? Drop your honest answer in the comments. Both are defensible. One of them just comes with a better theme song. And if you've been enjoying this trip through the slime, hit like and subscribe. It helps YouTube find more people who still know every word of Janish's line readings. All right, back to the containment unit. Number 7, Jason Reitman turned his own deleted scene into Ghostbusters canon. Now, long before he directed Ghostbusters Afterlife, Jason Reitman couldn't even make it through a Ghostbusters scene. Back in 1984, director Ivan Reitman cast his wife and 2 young children, Jason and Catherine, as terrified New Yorkers fleeing 550 Central Park West while the building came apart behind them. They only got one take. Both kids got too scared to keep going. Jason refused to do another, and Ivan scrapped the scene on the spot. The footage wasn't destroyed, it was just simply archived and then forgotten. But 37 years later, Jason Reitman was the one directing a Ghostbusters movie. While making Ghostbusters Afterlife, he dug through the production archives and rediscovered that abandoned 1984 footage of himself and his sister running from the haunted apartment building. Instead of leaving it buried, he worked it into the film, officially making his own failed childhood cameo part of the Ghostbusters canon. That isn't even Jason's only childhood appearance in the franchise. In Ghostbusters II, he plays a bratty kid at a children's birthday party, where a broke Ray and Winston are now working as entertainers, who confidently tells Ray Stantz that his dad says the Ghostbusters are full of crap. Jason Reitman spent his childhood either running away from Ghostbusters or declaring that they were finished. Then, he grew up, inherited the franchise from his dad, and then quietly turned one of his own biggest childhood failures into official Ghostbusters history. Number 6, HaroldRamis got even with his dad's robbers. Remember the 2 cackling ghosts who blow into the courtroom and then send everyone diving for the exit? Tony and Nunzio, the Scoleri brothers? Well, in the movie, they're a couple of executed criminals that the judge personally sent to the chair, and now they're back to settle up. It's a cute bit of writing, but the names, they weren't pulled out of thin air. HaroldRamis said that the brothers were loosely based on a real pair who once robbed and roughed up his father's store. So when he sat down to write the sequel, he reached into his own family history, dug out the guys who terrorized his dad, and then handed them a courtroom in Proton Stream. That's a long memory and a very specific kind of payback. The design was just as inside baseball. Effects artist Tim Lawrence built them as a tall, skinny, and short, fat double act, modeled after the Blues Brothers, the one that Aykroyd starred in. One ghost got stretched into a beanpole. The other got packed with spandex pouches full of goo so he'd wobble like a man made of pudding. So the courtroom ghosts are a family grudge in a Blues Brothers costume. Ramis took his father's worst afternoon, turned it into a special effect, and not one person in the theater ever caught it. Number 5, Winston almost got written out twice. Ernie Hudson has appeared in all 5 live-action Ghostbusters movies, but twice that almost didn't happen. When the first film was being made, Winston had a much bigger part. He showed up at the start with a full backstory, military background, all that. But then before cameras rolled, most of that got cut. Winston didn't turn up until the movie was half over, and he never even made it onto the poster. Hudson had said that it took him about a decade to make peace with how that went. For the sequel, the studio moved to shrink Winston again, maybe out of the picture entirely. But this time, someone stopped it. BillMurray. By Hudson's account, Murray's position was simple. If Ernie Hudson wasn't in it, then he wasn't going to do it. And a Ghostbusters 2 without BillMurray, that's not Ghostbusters 2 at all. Everyone in the room knew it. Winston stayed. Murray never made a thing of it. Hudson's talked about it with gratitude since. He called it the kind of thing that almost never really happens in the business. So Winston stood beside the team for 40 years. In no small part because one co-star quietly refused to make a sequel without him. Number 4, the ending that audiences remember, that almost didn't happen either. 8 weeks before Ghostbusters 2 opened in theaters, the last 25 minutes of the film didn't exist in their current form. After the first cut was screened for test audiences, director IvanReitman knew that something was wrong. Audiences liked the movie, but they couldn't follow the climax. They weren't sure how Vigo, the River of Slime, and the Ghostbusters victory all fit together. They thought defeating the villain looked too easy. So Reitman did something that most directors never get the chance to do. He threw out the ending. In just 4 days, he filmed an entirely new final act. The production then spent March and April of 1989 racing to write, edit, score, and finish visual effects before the movie's June 16th release. The Statue of Liberty marching through downtown Manhattan on the collective goodwill of the city, the film's single most ambitious sequence, was part of an ending that didn't exist while the marketing campaign was already running. So the ending that audiences saw that night had been written, shot, edited, and scored in approximately 8 weeks. Most films spend longer than 8 weeks on audio mixing alone. Number 3, who you gonna call in Scotland? Yeah, it's hard to imagine a Ghostbusters movie without New York. DanAykroyd almost made exactly that. His first crack at a sequel, written back in 1986, barely resembles the movie that we got. There's no mood slime, no Vigo, no Statue of Liberty. Instead, Dana Barrett gets pulled into an underground world in Scotland through a fairy ring, a portal opening into a whole hidden civilization beneath the earth. The Ghostbusters head to Scotland, go down after her, and square off against a banshee to bring her back. And the way down was pure Aykroyd, a pneumatic tube 2,000 miles long that the team rode for 3 days. He described it as a kind of primitive mail chute. Aykroyd later admitted the whole thing was just too strange to fly. Probably too inaccessible, in his words. He'd wanted to ditch New York entirely and flip the first film's rooftop showdown by sending the team deep underground instead. HaroldRamis came in to help wrangle it back to New York, and the Scotland trappings all vanished. The fairy ring, the banshee, the 3-day tube ride, all of it gone. But the bones of Aykroyd's idea quietly survived. In the finished movie, the River of Slime runs through New York's own abandoned pneumatic transit tunnels under Manhattan. His 2,000-mile tube, it didn't die, it just shrank and moved under the city. Number 2, the Ghostbusters outnegotiated their own studio. Ghostbusters II opened to $29.5 million. At the time, that's the biggest non-holiday opening weekend in history. It broke the all-time record for a single opening day, too. Now, by the end of its run, it pulled in more than $215 million worldwide. It sounds like a dream for any studio. The Ghostbusters had just made sure that it was an even better dream for themselves. BillMurray, DanAykroyd, HaroldRamis, and IvanReitman knew that Columbia couldn't make a sequel without them. So instead of demanding huge salaries up front, they took minimal paychecks in exchange for a big slice of the box office on the back end. Reportedly, around 10% of the profits each, a figure that Reitman waved off as too high while admitting that it was a big one. Now that move did 2 things. It kept the budget down to around $30 million instead of the $50 that it would have hit with full salaries. And it meant that every ticket sold put money straight into their pockets. They weren't betting on a paycheck, they were betting on the movie. And the movie, that made a fortune. So the smartest thing that the Ghostbusters did in 1989, it wasn't on screen. It was in the contract. Number 1, the happiest song in Ghostbusters has the saddest story. Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher is a 1967 Jackie Wilson record, and it might be the most purely joyful 3 minutes in American music. It's certainly up there, higher and higher. Anyways, DanAykroyd picked it for the climax because they needed a song that made the whole crowd feel something good at the same time. Wilson delivers it like joy is a renewable resource. The movie leaves out the rest, though. In 1975, mid-song, Wilson collapsed on stage from a heart attack and hit his head. He never really came back, spending his last 8 years barely conscious before he died in 1984. 5 years before this film used his voice to save New York. Elvis Presley, who idolized him, helped cover his medical bills before his own death in 1977. So the song the Ghostbusters used to prove that joy can shove the darkness back came from a man who lost nearly everything that made it. And yet, there it is, decades later, doing the exact thing it was built to do, lifting a room. The body gave out, but the voice never did. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about Ghostbusters 2. Which one hit you the hardest? Well, drop it in the comments, and don't worry, we're not going to release a river of psychic misery under your city just to make the point about subscribing. Although, we just might. Until next time, back off, man. We're scientists. This is Remember When.